afternoon and welcome to LMR Live from the Lyceum. I'm Maria Balach, Interim Chair and Associate Professor of Music at the University, and I'm also the creator of the Living Music Resource. LMR's mission is the expansion and innovation of education through musical experiences that focus on the integration and exploration of musical styles, community connections, art, culture impact, unexpected collaborations, music entrepreneurship, and the involvement of Ole Miss alumni. That's a lot to say. This weekend, we have been living this mission through several events. So Friday afternoon, we did a Between the Bar Lines masterclass where our guest, Dr. Susan Hurley, Artistic Director of Phoenix, Arizona's annual AIDS Quilt Songbook performance, dove deep into the scores of songs related to the AIDS Quilt Songbook with 3 of our students. And they received performance practice feedback while the audience benefited from the information about the background of the repertoire. Friday night, we had a concert, a quilt of song inspired by the AIDS Quilt Songbook. The program featured Dr. Susan Hurley and Dr. William Raber, but it also allowed current UM students to perform alongside with them, shoulder to shoulder, on a program that beautifully addressed difficult subject matter through a musical lens. Today, we're doing our pop culture approach here with our LMR Live. What do? We do edutainment. Today, we're going to get to know Susan Hurley and the many roles she plays in the world of music, but most importantly, how music endeavors can have social impact. We are thrilled to again be coming to you from the parlor in the Lyceum at the university. It's been a big weekend on campus. Lots of football, lots of tailgating, but lots of other things too. Things that we're doing musically, so we're thrilled to be in this location and be sharing with you. So, are you ready?
Nope.
All right. So who is Susan Hurley? I don't even know if we've had her in the shot yet. I don't know yet. So who is Susan Hurley? Susan Hurley is a soprano who has performed in Europe and the United States in repertoire that ranges from opera and musical theater to concert and recital literature. She was a prize winner in 2002 of the Meistersinger competition in Graz, Austria, where she sang over the course 25 principal operatic roles. As I already said, she is the artistic director of Phoenix, Arizona's annual AIDS Quilt Songbook, a performance project now in its 6th year. Let's jump across the pond. In Freiburg, Germany, she has been a stage director, script writer, and voice teacher with the German Singer Summer Advanced Training Program. She is also a neighbor in this state where she is a professor at Mississippi University for Women. Help me welcome Susan Hurley. It's fun to rattle all those things off. It's very exciting, the people that I get to brag on. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. First thing I want to do, we're going to get heavy today, but I want to first start off lighthearted with just 10 speed questions.
Oh no.
Okay, so you don't have to give them deep thought. This is before we get deep, we're going to be light. So we're just going to go through quick 10 speed questions so we get to know you a little bit, all right? Are you a morning or night person?
Morning.
Favorite food?
Oh goodness. Either leafy greens or dark chocolate.
Ooh, I'd go with the second. Yum, yum.
Oh,
Best day of the week?
Oh, any of them.
Favorite artist?
Oh no. It varies minute to minute. Let's say Mozart.
I love it. Favorite place you visited?
Berlin?
Got
Berlin.
it. Best season?
Summer.
Okay. First concert you ever attended, if you can remember?
I think it was a Chamber Music Society concert in New Jersey when I was about 8 or 9.
Wow. Text or phone call?
Coming over to text.
Got it. If you could meet one person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Cleve Jones.
Got it. And one word that describes you?
Sensitive.
Ah, I like that. Well, thank you for playing along. Want to jump into just sort of your background. You grew up on the East Coast.
That's correct.
Yes. New Jersey.
Yes.
Yes. And will you talk us through where you studied music? Undergrad, master's, doctorate. Take us through your map.
Yes, so undergraduate degrees, Bachelor of Music and Vocal Performance from Rutgers University. So I stayed home for that degree, did opera every single semester, starting with the second semester of my freshman year. Then for my master's, I headed west. I came to Texas, and I went to Rice. I studied with Joyce Farwell and with Kathleen Cowan while I lived in Houston, gigged there and taught there for actually several years. And then I went further west for that was a Master of Music at Rice for vocal performance, further west for the DMA in voice performance, and that was Arizona State University.
Very nice. And we have a mutual person through that Arizona State.
Yes, we have a teacher in common.
Yes.
We both studied with Anne Elgar-Kopta, who taught at Carnegie Mellon. I'm not sure for how long, but she was at Arizona State for a good 25 years.
I can't quote the exact year she was at CMU, but she was there a nice length of time. Yeah. So I had the pleasure of studying with her. Yes. Very cool. Who do you consider your key mentors or motivators throughout the trajectory?
Well, so I got a lot of very good vocal direction from Anne while I was at ASU. And another mentor, also at Arizona State in the music history side, was Kay Norton, or is Kay Norton, she's still there. She was on my doctoral committee, and we talked a lot about research, but she's also been a really strong supporter of my AIDS Quilt Songbook project. And the year I was trying to get it off of the ground, she was one of the handful of key people who helped me locate a venue that would cooperate in letting us perform some of the literature there, and volunteered with it. And she's a wonderful scholar. She also has a book out on music and well-being, so sort of the social and just the human aspect of music. So she's also been a key mentor.
I think the mentors are so important. I mean, and with young people, you know, who's going to be in your corner? Who are your people? Who are going to lift you up, be honest with you, but propel you forward? It's very important. So I want to jump. You already mentioned it, the AIDS Quilt Songbook. How did you first get involved with this project?
Okay, so I literally always wanted to sing it. Always, 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 since childhood. And you knew, or you sensed, I grew up in the 1980s and came of age in the mid-90s. And I was growing up in New Jersey, and I was doing theater, and I was doing music. And being around so many cultural centers, you saw the loss firsthand, and you would see that during those years, and we call them the plague years of HIV and AIDS, you would see people disappear. Literally, they would be around for one season of summer repertory theater, and then the next season they would not be there. And you wouldn't hear why, or at least as a child, I didn't hear why.
I don't think people talked about it.
No, there was a great deal of taboo around the entire subject. And I wanted, since childhood, to be involved in combating that stigma and the arts, because I always thought of myself as someone who could be sensitive and just imaginative, and so something with creativity in the arts. And I loved the idea of getting involved in other people's words, other people's texts and poems. And when the songs came about in the mid-90s, and I found out because I attended a concert. Yeah, show them this book.
I'm going to show the book.
These were the first 18 songs of the AIDS Quilt Songbook. And when I first heard them and met them, I knew immediately, I said, I want to be singing this, I'm going to be doing this literature.
I mean, some amazing composers.
Yes, you're going to recognize the names of the contributors. You've got John Harbison, Ned Rorem, Ricky Ian Gordon.
Ricky and Gordon.
Libby Larson. Other names I think you'll recognize.
Yeah.
So there are different 18 songs, and they are all written originally for baritone, and they were performed in 1992. This book, I think, came out in 93. And in the years since then, there have been so many songs added to the collection, to the AIDS Quilt Songbook, or for AIDS benefit performances that haven't been collected together and published. And in fact, many, maybe I should say most of them, are still unpublished, and so getting them is being an issue. It's another whole long story in itself. But when I finally had the opportunity to start putting together AIDS quilt songbook. And that was about, 6 years ago? Actually, more like 7 years ago I started planning it. And up until then, it was a lot of obstacles. I couldn't find a pianist, or somebody just didn't support it, or we would, at different times, say it was going to be me and a baritone, and we were going to do a joint concert of AIDS Quilt Songbook, and the person we first had kept saying, yeah, I want to do it, but kept not coming or couldn't make that day and backed out. And finally, all the timing and all the pieces came together. And it was absolutely serendipitous, because I felt like I'd been fighting obstacles and trying to get this
Well, I want to interject
benefit
there. I
going.
think, and this is important, I think, for anyone to hear, but especially our students. So many times when you're creating something from the get-go, every time you're creating something from the get-go, there are going to be obstacles.
You get a lot of no.
You get a lot of no, and it can create, especially if you are sensitive, I consider myself a sensitive being also, it can be this moment of, should I be doing this? Should we proceed forward?
Yes, does it mean I'm not supposed to do it?
Right.
If I couldn't find a pianist, or I have a pianist but they don't have time, and the baritone backs out, and I can't get a venue, and the place that I thought was the perfect fit said, well, we would
But
be,
what made you
difficult to
keep
find parties.
going?
Several things. One was I had to do this for me, having grown up then. One of the ways that I process things for my own life is through performance.
Right.
And once I've performed it, it's like that's out of me. The other thing was I believe that the songs need to be heard. And in Arizona, where I was at the time, I would talk to a lot of professional musicians, a lot of them vocalists, who had never heard of it. Then I started talking to people about 20 years younger than me, and I would say I wanted to do something about AIDS Quilt Songbook, and I would hear, what is the AIDS quilt? Which I probably should talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
And then finally, the final straw was, there was a morning when I got up and I was just reading local regional news and found out that one of the oldest AIDS service programs in Arizona had to close their doors. They were just losing funding, and it was one of the few that provided food and nutrition for low-income people with HIV/AIDS who cannot work. And they closed, and I remember asking someone, well, they had 300 clients. I said, where are those 300 clients going to go for food now? And this person said to me, they're going to go to Joshua Tree, which was a food pantry also in town for HIV/AIDS. Joshua Tree's clientele, I knew, was something like 100, or at least that was what I had read at the time. And I thought, so their workload burden is going to more than triple.
Right.
Well, do I want to get a food handler's license and volunteer once a week? But maybe I can do this. I'm a singer, and I know other singers. And then I was carrying this book around, and I had a baritone friend of mine say, what's in your hand? And I showed it to him, and he said, AIDS Quilt Songbook, what's an AIDS quilt? And I explained it, and then he looked through it, and he said, how did I not know there was this literature? And I'm a baritone, and he loves to delve deep into the difficult subjects. And he said, my next recital, I have to do this. And I said, well, why don't we do it together? And then again, with getting the venues, I was getting told no, or we couldn't afford it, and so on and so forth. We'd be paying as much for a venue as we thought we would raise. No, we wouldn't even raise that. So I was wondering what to do, and I was at a fundraiser house party for something else social in the community, and they had a guest speaker, and they wouldn't tell us who the guest speaker was, but it was a cause I cared about, so I went. And the guest speaker came in, and it was Cleve Jones, the name I mentioned earlier. Cleve Jones, I don't know if you know this name, a human rights activist, and he is actually the founder of the AIDS quilt. It was his idea.
And he was there.
He was there at this party.
And to be.
For like a year or two, I've been trying to figure out how to get this benefit off the ground. And he was there, and at one point they said, okay, everybody, stop chattering. We're going to listen to our featured speaker. And he just stood there in my friend's living room and told us about getting the idea for creating an AIDS quilt. And everybody said, what a stupid idea. That will never work. that won't happen. He finally found a few people, so he called a community meeting and rented space for 200, and something like 2 or 3 or 4 people showed up. Wow. So they managed to get something like 7 panels, 2 years from when he got the idea to when the first few panels were displayed. And then finally, it started to click. And and I hope I've got the year right, by October of '87, the quilt panels were displayed on the Washington Mall in DC. And then this growing quilt toured the US for years and years. And if you don't know what the quilt is, so the idea is it's a community art project. Any individual can create a commemorative quilt for someone who has passed from HIV/AIDS. Doesn't matter if you know them or not, if you want to memorialize someone. And you just design, you can have, if it was a child, you can have their favorite teddy bear sewn right in. Some people included the ashes of the deceased, so on and so forth. And there were people who just dedicated years of their lives to driving the truck with a growing quilt from one town to another, with host families hosting, so that they could bring it to communities who could then acknowledge and mourn together people they lost. There are stories of a mother from, I don't know where, but it was not on the West Coast, coming all the way to San Francisco with a bundle in her arms and handing it to the activists at the quilt workshop and saying, "This is my son." And it gave this incredible opportunity then to bring it into this community. And I personally didn't see the quilt for a long time. I had the opportunity in '92 and I didn't go because I thought I would cry and I would not be able to deal with it. And so I didn't see it until after 2010. So I saw just a few panels that were hung vertically.
Because now it is.
Yes, now the
it
quilt,
can't be in its entirety.
you can't even put the whole quilt in one place as a display. It's over 54 tons. And it's warehoused in Atlanta, and they have it codified so they know where to go to find a quilt for so-and-so or for this city or that city. So you can request the one, for instance, that you made for your brother or your child if you want it for an event. Something.
But I want to interject. I think that so many things about it are profound, and so many things about it are healing and beautiful. But the fact of that healing of, can't explain mourning process. Everyone goes through it differently, but to be able to publicly acknowledge what actually has transpired within your own terms and to heal in that way.
Yes.
I can't even imagine how significant and profound that would be. And I think then transferring it to what, as musicians, we can do with other forms of healing and communication.
Exactly. And so this is a musical parallel. The songbook was intended by its founder, William Parker, as a parallel to the AIDS quilt. So a different poet, a different composer, or multiple poets and composers contributing different works, etc., and that it would always be changing and expanding. They understood that things would change with time. And so we're starting to see more songs now that are about survival, or about hope, or living an ordinary life with medication, or about medication side effects. But it's not the incredible, I almost want to say doom.
Absolutely. I mean, the original songs,
and it really is.
But that was a reflection of what it was at that time.
And so there are two things that are so important about this project. One is to keep the stories going of what is going on now, because we lose sight of the fact that AIDS is not over. And it is a huge problem, especially in the South.
Absolutely, and that's why what motivated me to have you do this project here is that, and some of my students are here for my honors class where we were addressing this. We talk a lot about inequality, and oftentimes we tend to just think of that in terms of economics, and it's so much more than that. And I'm going to share some facts here. You know, I mean, we know Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the country and located in a region in the South with the greatest burden of HIV and AIDS. According to the CDC, the South accounts for 40% of Americans living with AIDS and 48% of AIDS deaths in 2009 and 45% of new AIDS diagnoses in the United States in 2010. The burden of the disease has fallen disproportionately upon African Americans. A Human Rights Watch report on HIV/AIDS in the American South singled out the state of Mississippi as having especially poor services for individuals living with it. In 2011, the UN AIDS launched the Countdown to Zero initiative. Do you know about this?
Yes.
A global plan to eliminate HIV
Yeah.
in children. And this is where I really come on board in this, with this inequality. We're looking at numbers of cases in women and children, and I don't think that's discussed enough, or that people realize. I think there's still this mentality when we talk about this disease as looking at a very prescriptive group, right? And it's
from the beginning. Yes, from the beginning, it was cast aside as a gay disease, which it even was not specifically from the beginning. We had people of color and other populations already in the beginning, and we knew that this was going to happen. That it was going to continue to spread, and it doesn't matter your gender or even age. We do have certain groups that are more at risk. Gay men and bisexual men still, yes. Women of color, and also we've seen very young people, ages 14 to 24, has been one of the largest groups for new diagnoses of HIV. And recently we've also started to see a rise in older adults, 50 and 60 plus, with new HIV infections. So it really is across the board. And so we need to continue the dialogue.
We need to continue the dialogue, and it's a difficult dialogue. But I think that, you know, research is important, and the medical side, but I personally don't think that's the solution to the inequality. I think that solution to the inequality, what can really make a difference, is people like all of us, you know, promoting these kinds of endeavors, having these difficult conversations, taking away some of the stigmatism that goes along with it. So people who have power are able to really address the inequalities, or to really address how we can have remission and prevention accessible to everyone.
Yes, and you're saying the STEM word is access, and that has been such an obstacle. When you don't have access to HIV treatment for whatever reason, you're too remote, you cannot afford it. Maybe you are working, but you can't afford a home. Well, then your priorities are far more immediate and basic than how am I going to get my medication if you're looking for a place to sleep. So there's so many variables and so many layers to this. But the one thing I do know is that unless we become aware that it actually is an issue, it won't be addressed.
Correct.
And I've talked to many people who have said, why are you doing an AIDS benefit? AIDS is over. No.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about what we did here, and I want to pull up a student who participated in the concert. We have Corinne with us. Corinne, I'm going to ask you to come on up. Give Corinne a welcome. So and this ties to what you were just saying, isn't it over? I think, not that Corinne was of this mindset, but I think there are a lot of young people, because we don't talk about it, that it's something that's over, it's done, or it'll never impact me. And it was interesting when I approached certain people about participating in this program, Corinne was very eager to do so. Would you be willing to share just what your experience was learning the piece you did? You learned I Never Knew by Ricky Ian Gordon.
Yes.
And what drew you to that piece?
I think it was, as I was reading through all the songs, the poetry just really resonated with me. I have people in my life that have been affected by HIV/AIDS, and it has such a stigma, you know, it really, you think those people are gross, but that's my family. You know, like once it affects you, you realize it can happen to anyone. And it is so important to talk about it because it can happen to anyone. It can happen to me. It can happen to you. You know, you have to be safe. You have to talk about it in order to practice, you know, safe sex. Like really, I think it is very important to talk about safe sex practices, and this is a way to open that subject up, I guess. Yeah.
So the piece that you did, you kept repeating the text, I never knew, I never knew, I never knew. What did that translate? I've actually been asked the audience, you gave such a heart-wrenching performance. It was just so sincere and vulnerable. And as an audience member watching that performance, it sparked so many different things for me. You know, the idea of if I only knew you were going through this, or if I only knew this was a possibility, or if I only knew I could have helped you, right?
Right. I think this song goes through so many emotions. You know, there's anger, there's sadness, there's regret, there's guilt in surviving. You know, there's you never knew, like, what if you never even knew that they had it, and then all of a sudden they're gone. There's so many emotions in that song that can be portrayed, and that Ricky Ian Gordon really does write into the song.
And I think the thing to remember, there may be people in this room right now, I mean, it's you know, is this comfortable? No. But I think the thing to remember, if we connect in some way, even if it translates to you to a completely different subject, or a completely different cause, or a completely different, that's okay. I mean, however it translates to you to make you feel the importance of the text of the music, I think that's okay. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Yes. I'm not quite sure. So how was it performing with you know, you hadn't met Dr. Hurley beforehand? It
was so cool. I have to say, it was such a special experience for me. Being able, I was saying earlier that, you know, I'm so used to performing music that was written so long ago. And in a way, there is a slight disconnect because of that. And this is so recent, and it feels still so raw. And I really just felt so vulnerable, and I felt so attached to the music because of that. And it was such a cool experience.
And that's something important I think we have a responsibility as teachers to do. I love what you said, because so often in the repertoire that we assign, it does end up being a disconnect. Or the literature someone's assigned in a class, there'll be a disconnect. Yeah. Why is there a disconnect? Maybe it's in a language I don't speak. Maybe it's said in a prose I don't understand. So giving students a piece, whatever it may be, doesn't have to be this, something different, where they can connect, then that experience can translate to other works. Do you feel like that?
I totally feel that. I want to go through all my music now, you know, and look at it with a new perspective and make it more personal, which is always the goal, you know, but this experience really made me see, like, how vulnerable, how real this can be.
I did not hear her say this until this moment, and I'm like, I am loving it. I mean, this is fantastic.
It really was.
I mean, it's great. I really didn't know you were going to say that.
It was really amazing. Yeah.
I think that's something we need to remember as teachers. And I think another thing I was going to say earlier when you were bringing up, we as teachers have to not be lazy. And I think what happens a lot, we get in a routine of the repertoire that we do, or how we program things, and we have to broaden that perspective.
There is a lot of music about stuff that really matters, and the fun thing, or maybe not fun thing, but the profound thing is, having done things like this, I know that I found my voice again as a singer once I did get this launched. And then, yes, I had a similar experience of going to other music and finding the need for that. Why did this German poet have to write about that flower that came up through the snow? I can feel that. But you're laughing, but
no,
you
I
put yourself in the place of it as being a real experience. There is so much in this music that is literal, and in Ricky's poem that we wrote, it's literal, and that happened. And another thing is that when you're doing this, we connect to that part of ourselves, the authentic part that can bring you to singing in the first place. And whether you started singing because of wanting to be involved in a social cause, or to worship God, or because it brings you joy and life is hard, and so you want to bring joy to other people who are also experiencing that life is hard. These are all very authentic, very meaningful reasons to sing. And so we connect to the literature, and then we can revitalize ourselves and go out and do this. It also gives then that permission to the listeners, yes, I can find my voice, whatever that is. If it's a literal voice, if you're in a room full of singers, yes, please put these on your next recital, or do a community recital.
There's no reason you can't put one. It doesn't have
one
to be
or
a whole
five,
program, or
do a whole program, or do what we do in Arizona, which is find an organization where the mission aligns, and they're bringing the quilt every year for World AIDS Day. And they have a venue with a grand piano and a stage where, obviously not all the quilt, but maybe 15 or so panels of quilt. And we're there, and it's allowing the community members to process it. I had one lady who just introduced herself to me last year. She'd been to all 5 years, came over and over and over again. And she said, I just connect with you and with this literature because I was also alive, and I remembered the 80s, and I watched what happened to my friends, and I'm still so angry. And when I hear this, it helps me to process. And this is something, whether it's this literature or there's so much else,
but that's
you
the
can
power,
find a growing body of contemporary American art song.
And the power that
power.
music has. I mean, that's the key. I mean, that is. And it really can just create, we say this a lot here, but creates this chance for conversation and connection that otherwise might not happen, right? And I think even to go so far as someone comes in, even if they're put off by it, at least it sparked something, right? There's a chain reaction in different ways.
Yes, and I have had people tell me, I'm sorry, but honestly, I don't think I can go. I don't think I can handle it. And that's absolutely a legitimate response. And one of our biggest supporters told me the first time he came, and he's come for 5 years in a row, I almost had to flee the room. I'm glad I stayed. And he's there every year, and we've set actually music to one of his texts. And together we're processing this thing that we have trouble to let go of. If you remember that time, it's difficult to remember.
But I mean, I even translate this, we talk so much nowadays about so many people and young people suffering with anxiety and many disorders, and I think this translates to that in the sense that we need to communicate openly and connect to our humankind in whatever way that's going to be, because we're in life together, right? We're all figuring this out together. And so whether it's this subject matter, whether it's something else, to allow that to happen is vital now more than ever, more than ever. Well, thank you, Corinne, for sharing with us. We appreciate it. Thank you. All right. I want to shift because there's so much more to talk about. And another thing you're involved in related to your doctorate, the listening and hearing, the Tomatis method, yes?
Right.
Can I read a little bit about what I heard about it, or do you want to launch into explain what it is?
Go ahead and read.
All right. I'm just
curious to know what you found.
What I found, and tell me if I'm off or on kilter. And I'm gonna. This segue does make sense. With this, because tied to this connecting in the time we're living in, I think we find it harder now than ever to actually listen, and then to actually hear what we're listening to. And this method hits that nail on the head. So what I read was learning and communicating are processes that can seem easy as they are natural for most of us, but for 1 in 10 people, it is a daily battle. The ability to properly process sensory information is compromised. It is said in this case that listening is disrupted. In the process of information, the ear plays a fundamental role since it is the main gateway to our brain. It picks up the surrounding sounds and those of your own voices, converts them into electrical stimuli, and transmits them to the brain, which analyzes them. More surprisingly, it also captures our movements and is heavily involved in coordination, balance, and rhythm. It therefore has a vital function in daily life, whether through talk, to argue, to follow instructions, read, learn, memorize, or simply to move. When communication between the ear and the brain is blurred, our ability to interact with the outside world is compromised. The result is often a loss of self-confidence that will enhance in turn the difficulties of communication and learning. Does that sound like a...
That sounds like a lot of things somebody said, yes.
So I just want to give a little background, because when I was first looking at this, I was a bit, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And how does this translate to what we're doing? So would you tell us a little bit about the founder of the method?
Sure. Okay, so Dr. Alfred Tomatis was a medical doctor. He was an ENT, and his career took place in the 19th century. He was born in 1920, died around 2001.
And when I first heard this, I thought this has to be something new, right? Not something new.
Yeah, so his discoveries date from the 1940s, and his whole entire process it began quite accidentally, but it was one of those serendipitous things where we have an ENT doctor who, because his father was an opera singer, most of his first patients were singers. And Tomatis had grown up around opera houses, hearing singers talk about things like having a voice in the mask. And so he thought he understood how voice worked. And then when singers came to him with phonatory problems or pitch problems, where could he locate the cause of the problem so that he could help them? It was a question. And at the same time, it was the mid-1940s, and I want to say it was the French Air Corps that had Tomatis assigned to doing listening or audiograms to assess the hearing of munitions factory workers, because this was around the time when they were asking, oh, could such loud noise as jet engines and so on and so forth, or bombs, and could that be causing hearing loss? And so he was tracking their hearing through audiograms. And his journey began when one of his father's colleagues came to him with problems phonating on pitch in a certain portion of his range.
Okay.
And nothing he was trying all sorts of topical solutions to the throat, and nothing that he could do with vocal folds seemed to work. He was looking at vocal folds as being the controller of the pitch, and so trying to sort of tune them or tighten them up the way you might tighten a guitar string or something. And it didn't work. In fact, the problem got worse, and the singer just kept showing up. He'd perform at night, and he would show up at Tomatis' office in the morning and say, "It's getting worse. Find out what's wrong with me." Basically, "I'm not leaving. Find out what's wrong, and let's fix it." And Tomatis was at the end of his rope, so he searched around for some other test. And okay, so he gave him some headphones, and he did the hearing test with the singer that he had been giving the other part of the day to the factory workers. And the results of the hearing test showed the same curve of hearing loss that the factory workers had, the ones who had had hearing loss. And this raised a question for him: is control of the voice then related to the ear? And that began his whole career. So for 40 plus years, then he's examining and exploring theoretically, and he's experimenting right in his clinic with not just patients, but friends, colleagues, visitors.
Anyone who would.
Yeah, basically anybody. Can I put a headphone on you? Or could you sing this? Or could you play your violin this way? And so he did all these exploratory things without benefit of a research laboratory and a controlled environment. And he would just observe what would happen and make note of it and start gathering patterns. And as a result of this, and so it's called grounded theory, if you begin with data and draw conclusions later, or come to your not conclusions, your hypothesis comes from your data. He ended up coming up with an incredible plethora of theories about the interrelationship between the ear and the voice, and how the voice is guided by the ear. And I really do mean how. He would trace neural networks and write about also the embryology. Tomatis was absolutely up to date with what was the latest in his day, so 40s, 50s, 60s. He was studying the sciences and cybernetics. He studied embryology, neurology, and was tying so many different ends together. And his definition of ear extended then, of course, to the brain and the auditory centers. And to some extent, then that means our whole nervous system. And so it's really, it's like a study of everything. A good description, and this comes from Tomatis practitioner Dr. Billy Thompson, is that it is a global and holistic process. And so I need to define process and method, because we've said these words but haven't said what we're actually talking about. He has all these theories, and that's one thing. But in his experimentation, he also invented what he called an electronic ear, and it's done via computer, where you're interacting with your own voice or with pre-recorded music through headphones, and if it's your voice, then you have microphone. And you're going through filters where certain frequencies might be filtered out or in. So maybe focusing only on low frequencies, or they're filtered out and you're listening to high frequencies.
People are trained to be specialists.
Yes, precisely. The field is called audio psychophonology, so sometimes you will hear referred to as audio psychophonology. Other times you'll hear Tomatis practitioner or something of that sort. So yes, it is a specialized training, because what Tomatis did as an outgrowth of his, and going back to the 40s with the factory workers, was he observed changes in the audiogram of their hearing based on their psychological state.
See, I find this part really interesting.
Well, and so did he. That's what.
Because this directly applies to voice teaching.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, it does. Oh yes, it does. Oh yes, it does.
And raising teenagers, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I'm sure. I am sure it does. I'm sure it does. So he observed these changes in the actual hearing. And so he said there's a psychological component to hearing. And he came up with a way of measuring that on a graph that you can read. So he's measuring frequency in one level, and he's measuring decibel, and he's measuring your self-listening, how you listen to yourself through bone conduction.
Interesting.
And he's measuring how you listen through air conduction. So it's a little visual graph that then can start to talk about your relationship to yourself, your relationship others, your expression in the world, and he started finding all sorts of patterns. And so we have nowhere near enough time. So I would refer you to any of either the ear and the voice, or the conscious ear, or these are by Tomatis, or by one of his proteges, Paul Madol, When Listening Comes Alive, and you get a good introduction to what these listening tests measure. So your practitioner is trained to administer a listening test, not a hearing test. And so it's measuring your attention.
Interesting.
Not the physical capacity to hear. So you can find people whose hearing may be a little bit compromised. Maybe you spent time in the Air Force and didn't have enough hearing protection, so some frequencies are lost. But if your listening is optimized, it's a completely other it's a completely other thing. And you can have perfectly intact hearing, but poor listening. And why? And then Tomatis talks about an open ear or a closed ear. If you close your ear, let's say I come into you for my lesson and you say, well, gee, Susan, can't you learn this rhythm? I mean, anybody can learn this rhythm. What's your problem? And I feel bad? You would never say that.
No, I wouldn't. Let's just be clear.
but like, hypothetical.
But if I did.
But if somebody did.
Yeah.
Or if I said that to somebody.
No, it happens.
If I said that.
It happens.
Then that feels awful, right? So then you want to close that incoming information. And Tomatis talks about the ways that we close our listening. And he defines ear as being so much of ourselves, also our back and our posture or body use. Closing, turning the back, but also literally what we do when we tune out and we put our focus on some other thing. So if we want to sing, we want that ear and that body and that breathing to be open.
When you hear this a lot, this happens at least in my voice studio a lot, where we talk about needing to listen more to whoever you're collaborating with, right? And I think often in our attempt, and I speak from personal experience also, of wanting to do it well or do it right, you end up just closing off the ear, right?
Yes.
And we think we're working hard and doing great. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, I need to actually hear. And the same thing works in just communication, right? If I need to have an important conversation with someone and I'm really pushing my agenda, I'm not really going to be listening to what the other person's saying, and we're really not going to make any progress. So it just, to me, it's amazing because it can apply to so many things. So tell me, how did it come about? Susan has written a chapter in a new book, So You Want to Sing with Awareness,
Correct.
which is a NATS, National Association Teachers of Singing book series, and you're chapter 8.
Correct.
In the book.
Yes.
And it's all about the tomatis. I suggest buying the book. And tell me how that came to fruition, because for my people who are trying to create opportunity, that's one of the things I want taken away from today. How does that come
how does
to be?
opportunity arise?
Right.
Okay. Well, it started with I happened to choose that finally as my doctoral dissertation project.
And I want to interject there. She shared with me last night at dinner, and I say this to anyone who's going to pursue a doctorate or pursue any degree. And even my honors kids hear me say this all the time when you're picking the final research paper. Make sure it's something that you're really passionate about and can lead to something else, not just to get it done so it sits on a shelf. And this is case in point.
Exactly.
So, go.
And I wish I could say I had been smart in choosing it for that reason, but it was simply that it interested me more than probably the topic that would have sat on the shelf. So I changed from that other topic to this because I was so intrigued by it. And it still raises a lot of questions. It still does. We're still finding out theories that we substantiate or ones that we haven't found if that substantiates or not, and there's so many theories.
Right.
And they're also interesting, and that's the thing. So I did this very interesting topic, and I started getting asked to talk about it because as singers we haven't been hearing or listening very much about this tomatis listening process.
I mean,
or the
who in the room has
psychology
heard of the
listening.
tomatis before today? I had not heard
wow.
about it. Anybody? No.
Oh, wow.
Well, until I told you, right? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay, I go to a lot of places where people say, yes, I've heard of that, and I've always wanted to know more, but they're not sure what it is.
Right.
Or a room full of people who may be saying that they had not. And it's been around for now generations. So look into it, and you can read my paper.
Your paper?
You can read my paper free online on my website. Or this chapter is going to be a little shorter.
So did they seek you out for it to be in the book?
Yes, exactly. So there's multiple steps to it. I was asked to talk about it. One NATS chapter invited me. And then when the International Congress of Voice Teachers put out the call for proposals, I was like, well, I've done this talk on tomatis. Why don't I just send a proposal to do the same talk? I was like, sure, I'll just send the proposal to go to ICVT. And then they picked it, and I said, oh, okay. So I am now going to, it was Stockholm, and went to Stockholm and talked about it there. And, you know, I don't know if he pronounces his name Matthew Hoch or Matt Hott, the editor.
He's been a guest on LMR Live before.
How does he pronounce it?
Matt Hoch.
He does pronounce it Hoch, okay.
I'm looking to make sure I'm saying the right thing.
Matt was there.
Yes.
Matt was there, and he came to my presentation, and he liked it, and he said, oh, that was really interesting, and I was really impressed. I enjoyed it very much, and I said, thank you, and we waved bye. And that was 2017, and I was on vacation in June of 2018, I think it was, and I get this email from Matt, would you consider doing a chapter tomatis for a book? Sure. And so then I did it. And it's supposed to be coming out, I think, in March of 2020, maybe February.
Wonderful, wonderful. Connecting those dots. Connecting those dots.
So if you have a topic that is intriguing and that has been maybe a little bit underdone, and it must intrigue you because of the hours you'll be putting into it. Yeah, go for that topic, because that's how these kinds of
then it snowballs
serendipitous
beautifully.
things happen. And may I make one other comment about serendipitous and meant to be? I was starting to say earlier about Aids Quilt Songbook, and Cleve Jones was speaking, and all the people who told him that his wanting to create a quilt was stupid, and it was a bad idea, it was not going to work, it was unfeasible, no, don't put them on the ground. All these conversations. But he was so sure, and everybody said no, but he pushed through it, and now we have this. It's the largest community art project in the world, and it's so deeply meaningful and healing to so many, tens of thousands or more people. And the point that he concluded with when he was speaking was, if there is something that you feel, you know in your heart, you want to do, you're supposed to do, particularly if everybody says no, you can't, that's what you are supposed to do. So whether it's a mysterious topic like tamales, or it's a controversial thing like something with sexually transmitted diseases, or a long, ugly history. And by the way, that's of course not the only means of transmission of HIV.
Right.
But whatever that is, whether it's controversial,
but I think
if you feel it,
I think that's the key. I think that's the key.
That
and
is
back
what
to
you
just
were
we're
supposed to
humans.
do.
If it is that to the core, and you believe it with that much of your being, you go. And I love too, if everyone's telling you no, that's a red flag for some reason. Like you're saying,
maybe that is your thing, your
the one,
or your
You are the one. All right. So we have to have a little goofy fun here. This is part of it. And she's petrified about this, but she's being a good sport. So along the lines of hearing and listening, we are going to play a game called LMR's Listening Test, Jingles All the Way. Let's watch our video. Our listening ears as we jingle all the way. What we're going to do are hear brief commercial jingles that span a wide age range. And then whoever can guess what the jingle is to gets a point. You can help me keep score, Lily? Fantabulous. So when you believe that you know what it is, we just raise your hand, and then we'll know to call on you, right? So don't raise your hand if you don't know, but don't be shy even if it's questionable, right? All right, yes, no sheepishness. All right, let's do one just for fun. Let's see if we know in the crowd. All right, listening up.
Give me that fish. Give me back that filet fish. Give me that fish. What if it were you hanging up on this wall? If it were you in that sandwich, you wouldn't be
Brady?
laughing at all.
All right, do you know?
That is the first time I've ever heard that.
I didn't know this one either. You know it?
Is this McDonald's?
Yes! McDonald's, the house has it. All right. I didn't get that one either.
I should trust my gut. That's what I thought it was.
Trust your gut. All right. That's going to be our hashtag, trust your gut.
Trust your gut.
All right. Very nice. Very nice. All right.
Okay.
Now it's you guys. Oh. Go. All right, Ben, what is it?
Subway.
Subway. Ding, ding, ding. One
Not
for
even
Ben. I
here.
didn't know that one either when they played for me. I was like, showing my age. Showing my age. All right. Number 3.
Nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea. Yay!
Sounds like a song.
For 5 different stomach problems, Pink does more than you think.
Any idea? Any idea? Nobody. Anyone in the house? No. Pepto-Bismol! We got it! Very nice. I don't have to give the prize to the audience. I don't know. That is correct. Pepto-Bismol. Moving on to number 4.
1, 2, 1, 2, 4. Give me a break. Give me a
Oh.
Is it Kit Kat?
Yeah,
Kit
yeah.
Kat. Ben 2. It's all right. Susan, I always tell the story. I've made a fool of myself on these games. You're not. You're beautiful. It's working out well. So no matter how it goes. All right. 2 to Ben. 2 to Ben. 0 for Dr. Hurley. It's all good. Number 5. This time.
Hello, amigo. And I've come to say bananas have to ripen in a certain way, and when they're flecked with brown and have a
I don't know if I know it or not.
bananas taste the best and are the best for you.
That was the first one I got when they played all these for me. I was like, oh, all right. 2 to 1. I gotta understand, you probably never heard that one before.
You know, oddly enough, there's a Stu Leonard's in my hometown that has that play over the PA system every like half hour.
Oh, all right, all right. You were
Couldn't remember what it was, but it was familiar.
I had a music teacher teach me that in grade school, yes.
Oh,
why I
that's
knew that.
funny. All right. Moving on to the next one, please.
Possibilities. Here's a launch that steals the show. Kids' imaginations throw at what they like. They're the boss. Good. Applause, applause. Possibilities.
Lots of heads shaking. Ben? What'd you say? No. What did you say? Campbell's soup. Okay. Audience 3, Ben 2, Susan 1.
That one.
Next one.
I am stuck on
Is that all?
We're bleeping out the words. Go ahead, Ben. Band-Aids.
I didn't even.
That is Band-Aids.
Band-Aid stuck on
Oh.
me.
That's right. All right. Next one. So brief.
I know it.
Is that it? Okay, one more time. This was hard. You have an idea?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, how did you know? Audience 4.
What was it?
Very good.
Spice.
I
I
have
hope
to
you
go
brought
buy
enough
prizes.
prizes.
All right. Very good. All right, moving on. Next one.
For that chocolatey coated ice cream loaded big and no room for a stick.
Yeah. Oh.
Yes?
That's a Klondike bar.
Klondike bar. Very good. 4. Wait, how much are you up to,
4,
Ben?
I think.
Is he 4? 3, 2. All right, thank you for keeping our accounting firm, making sure we're good. All right, next one.
A chance.
It's getting good.
Flop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is.
That's also Alka-Seltzer, is it not?
Alka-Seltzer. We haven't had Alka-Seltzer yet.
Oh,
Alka-Seltzer.
with Pepto-Bismol. That
Yes,
was my
yes.
confusion.
Oh.
Different problems.
Different problems. Alka-Seltzer, yeah.
Alka-Seltzer. Very good. 4, 2, 4. All right. Number 11. This one's, go ahead.
Is this, it's Hefty Trash Bags,
It's
yeah?
hefty trash bags. You got it. You got it. 5. We only have 2 more. We only have 2 more. Next one's a little tricky. All right, moving on.
There ain't no bugs on me. There ain't no bugs on me. There may be bugs on some of you mugs, but there ain't no bugs on me.
I've silenced the room.
I think I know what the product is. I don't know what the brand is.
Okay. Anyone in the house? Good guess. What?
Like
It's not-
lice,
it's
like
a-
a lice shampoo or something. That's what I thought it must
I just don't know what it's called.
be. Yeah, little dog singing the song.
Flea color.
Yes, yes, yes. Know the brand?
No.
All right, we're going to just have to give this one out. Canine Advantix.
Oh.
That one was hard. That one's very hard. All right, last one. Be ready. This one is going to get, I think, wait, don't do it. Don't do it yet. Okay, have your hands ready. This is the final one. Here we go. All right.
Meow, 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 meow.
Yes,
meow,
that
meow,
is cat
meow,
fix,
meow,
cat
meow,
food.
meow, meow,
Meow,
meow,
yes.
meow.
That's correct.
All right.
Very nice. All right, so what do we end up with? 4, 5,
Oh, Oh, you had
Was he
5?
5?
I thought we both had 4.
Oh, I did.
4? Well, I think we give you a hand.
So
And Ben, in true,
enough
I have to
prizes.
be,
Oh my goodness.
I'm going to give you, do you care if I give Susan the gift? And I'm going to give you something else afterwards. Since
please
I will
do.
see you tomorrow, I'm going to give you a gift. All right, we're going to,
My consolation prize.
your little consolation prize. We're going to give you a little LMR shirt. And
Oh,
then,
awesome.
so you can wear this at the W and they'll say, what is that? Here you go. Here's your little LMR shirt. LMR shirt, and I'm going to hook you up tomorrow, Ben, all right?
Awesome.
All right. Let's put this in here. All right, Ben, thank you for playing. All right, so many people to thank. I want to thank all of our LMR supporters and partners, our loyal viewers, the College of Liberal Arts, Department of Music, and the Sarah Isom Center for Women and Gender Studies. They helped us to bring this to fruition and make this happen. I want to thank the people who make up LMR, Brady Bramlett, Executive Managing Director, Corinne, my graduate assistant, Ava Street, Haley, and Reagan, undergraduate assistants, and Alexis and Lilly, who are taking a course with me, our house musician, Ben, our photographer, Maddi, lots of people working on this project. Give them a hand. Let's take stock. We are mid-season, and thus far, LMR has done a career development trip to Nashville, 4 LMR Live programs, 2 concerts, 1 master class, and we've only just begun. So be on the lookout for things that are coming up the rest of the season, and help me give a very heartfelt welcome. No, we're not. Very heartfelt thank you to Susan Hurley for coming and pushing our comfort zone and allowing us to discuss things that need to be discussed and engaging with our fellow mankind, humankind, in a way that has purpose. So I want to thank you for being the instigator of that. So let's give her a hand, and I'm going to give you a hug. And as I always say, the music revolution continues. Till next time.